Welcome. Good evening. This is the Formless Podcast number 14. We made it through the dreaded number 13, which was quite an ordeal. I'll maybe go into that in another time. I'm Dustin, your host, and joining me is Tyler the Superhuman.
Here I am.
And Kevin Motz. Mr. Kevin Motz. Another student at the school, a father, family man, sheep farmer.
Something like that.
Something like that, yeah. How many sheep do you guys have right now?
I think 14.
14? Are you're gonna sell some tomorrow?
Hopefully. There's a guy that's supposed to come by, but he hasn't confirmed a time yet.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I never keep track of how many there are, just because they keep get rid of some, and then there's more, and then I just stopped counting.
Originally, when we planned to do this, we usually do it on like a Saturday or a Sunday, or sometimes a Monday after classes. And Kevin was talking with me, and he's like, "I can't do it on Saturday. I gotta sell some sheep." So we planned around. And the other cool thing about Kevin, not just the sheep farming aspect, but he was the first guest to email us a question. And not just a question, but probably the longest email I've ever received that wasn't spam. So
it's a good email.
Yeah, it's a great email. Don't get me wrong. I'm not harassing you in any way, but I'm just gonna read a couple of parts of the email just so you can kind of get, as a listener, kind of get an idea of what his question was and what we wanted to talk about today. So if that's okay, real quick. There's a quote from Hemingway. I mean, how much more dignified can you get? Like, you know,
if you ask me how much Hemingway I have read, that quote is the answer.
I have a book of Hemingway short stories in my truck. I've only read, and it was because I was forced to, one story of Hemingway. I read a lot, or I used to read a ton. I need to get back into it, but I could never get Hemingway. And he's supposed to be like the greatest author, American author at least, ever, you know. I just find it drier than dirt. It's hard. But one story that I really like is The Old Man and the Sea. And I fought reading it just as hard as I've ever fought anything in my life. And I had my freshman English teacher made me read it. And he was like, for whatever reason, he was like pointing me out in class and was like, "Did you read the chapters today?" You know? And so I read through the book because he was a tough dude and I didn't want to get on his bad side. I read the book and it was actually really, really good, but I haven't read anything else by him. I tried to a couple of different times. So anyway, long story short, I get this book of short stories by him. I've had it. We've been doing the podcast for 4 months. I've had it for 6 months or so, longer than 6 months, and I've managed to read 2 short stories out of like a whole anthology of short stories. I've read 2.
Man, they must be gripping. I'm just kidding. They probably
They're
are.
good.
Yeah.
They're good. It's just like, I don't know. It's like jazz music or musicals. You have to like that style, right? Taste for it. And I'm just Neanderthal. I just can't get it. You know, it's very plain, very dry, very matter of fact. I don't know. I just can't do it. And I'm getting better. I'm going to be a civilized human being one day. And I'll get through it, but man, sometimes I'm like. So anyway, the first part of it is a quote from Hemingway's "A Farewell to Arms," and correct me. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. I do believe that's from the book, right?
As far as you know, yeah, like I said, this all came about from hearing an interview with someone else on the radio, and that led me to this, and that's kind of what precipitated all this.
Perfect. The problem with cowardice is either too much or too little imagination. Those with not enough imagination can really be brave in a war. Could charge the enemy machine guns because they can't imagine themselves dying, or they don't imagine themselves dying. They imagine themselves overwhelming the machine gun somehow. And those other people who don't charge can imagine themselves being shot in the face. Pretty heavy. And then it goes on, and the question is, my most recent experience with this during intermediate class several weeks ago, when everyone did a few rounds of sparring with Sensei Court. It was my turn to spar with Sensei. I found that I was unable to imagine myself delivering a strike without being simultaneously struck myself. Because of this, any strike I attempted, whether it was a kick or a punch, was consistently delivered out of range. I found that not only did I not hit my target, but I left my opponent with a significant advantage. This was due to the fear that once I crossed the critical distance line, I was more vulnerable to my opponent than he was to me. I contrast this with some of my first experiences with sparring, where I would cross into range without any concept of my opponent's ability to block and counter my attack, and to effectively kick me in the face, a situation where I had no concept of my own vulnerability. My question is, how has imagination in this context progressed throughout your martial arts training? As you've progressed through your belts, learned new techniques, and sparred with new partners, have you gone through periods of either too much or too little imagination when sparring? As you both work with newer and less experienced students, how have you noticed your students progress through periods of too little or too much imagination? Do you want to answer that first?
Yeah, so first off, I think that's a great question. Like that email, like I read...
I was inspired.
I was inspired too. It got me thinking, like I was like, yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about, like when he wrote that email.
First of all, like go I don't mean to interrupt you, but the first part of that with like dealing with the machine guns and stuff, I have no concept of that because I've never been shot at. Mm-hmm. Tyler's actually seen combat.
Yes.
I don't know your whole story, and you don't have to get into that if you don't want to, but like, have you had somebody shoot at you?
Many times. Yeah, no, when I was in Afghanistan, when I was deployed to Afghanistan with the Army, my job, my platoon's job was that our, 25, 30 man platoon would drive down these roads in Afghanistan, and our job was route clearance. So basically our job as route clearance was that we were to find IEDs, or bombs, I should say.
Yeah.
IEDs, improvised explosive device, that were in the road, either in the road or on the side of the road, either buried or disguised or hidden.
So, did you have equipment to do this, or were you just like the crash test dummy?
No, that's a good question. Yeah, no. So early on in the early 2000s, when we were early on, they in Afghanistan and Iraq. In the early 2000s, we didn't have specialized equipment on a mass scale to do this. So guys were literally visually looking with their eyes, leaning out of a Humvee, looking for bombs in the road, disturbed dirt. When I got to Afghanistan in 2009, we had specialized equipment to detect that stuff in the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, so
dudes were hanging out of the Humvee going, that's disturbed dirt. Don't stop.
Yeah, that's what I heard. That's what I heard from firsthand from guys that did it in Iraq in like 04, 05 or 03, 04, 05.
The biggest military in the world.
And they were
how we're doing.
Yeah, that's how we were doing things. A guy leans out at night with a flashlight and just looks ahead. But when I was there, we had specialized equipment, specialized vehicles with detection to detect metal in the dirt and anomalies in the dirt. But so anyway, so you're driving down these roads in Afghanistan, you start, bombs there in the road, didn't get there by accident, it was put there by someone, and usually the someone who put it there sitting there waiting to shoot at you with their buddies. So
if you stop to dismantle the bomb, then they shoot at you.
Jay would kind of roll with it if you're driving down the road and your equipment, either the operator of the equipment doesn't catch it, or the equipment doesn't catch it, or a combination of both, and a vehicle rolls over it, the terrorists might blow up that bomb. And then they use that as the start of an ambush. A bang, take out one of the front vehicles, disable that vehicle, and the other guys start shooting. The guys on the hill start shooting at you. Wow. Or wherever, behind rocks. Or they could be below you. They could be above you, below you, beside you, whatever. So, yeah.
Wow.
So that was route clearance in Afghanistan in 2009 for me. So it was you definitely it was the most exciting time of my life. That is for sure.
Well, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
Yeah.
But like I when I first started reading this, I'm like, I've never charged machine guns, dude. What are you talking about?
Well, you charged an opponent.
I've charged an opponent, but that's a whole heck of a lot different than a machine gun. A machine gun will rearrange your body
very quickly.
Make you Swiss cheese. I've charged people that made me feel like I was going to be Swiss cheese, but that's a different feeling altogether, I would assume.
I think that. Do you have something on this?
No, go ahead. I wanted to let you finish.
Yeah, but I think that. So what you read this whole email. So basically, it boils down to an individual can have either too little or too much imagination, right? In terms of as far as those. The problem with cowardice is either too much or too little imagination. Those with not enough imagination can be really brave in a war, could charge the enemy machine guns because they can't imagine themselves dying, or they don't imagine themselves dying. They imagine themselves overwhelming the machine guns somehow. And those other people who don't charge can imagine themselves being shot in the face.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I think definitely. I think there's some truth to that statement. But in regards to martial arts, right? Mm-hmm. Like what you were saying about you were afraid to go to move and cross the line and get close enough to your opponent, right?
Correct. So we were doing a bullet sparring drill.
Yeah.
And everyone had a couple rounds with Sensei Cord, and if you guys have sparred with him, he's a very frightening person to spar with because he's so capable.
Yes.
So looking at that, it's hard to know that, one, I have to deliver a strike, because if I don't, I am just completely vulnerable. But in crossing that range to do that, for me, I couldn't imagine myself getting close enough without getting hit first because he's so capable.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things to where you have to try either way in that regard.
Yes, it's kind of, and that, and what we do in class, we should explain for people who don't join us in class regularly, which you should. Bullet sparring is each person gets one shot, whether it's a punch or a kick, and in a 30-second, 45-second little match, each person gets one shot. And it's kind of a one and done thing. And it's to force you to do something. In my personal, from my perspective, I think it's to force people to do something. And a lot of what I felt like you were talking about comes with experience. If you look back at your first day of class or the first time you ever sparred versus now and see the growth that you've experienced, it's been tremendous. I haven't done a whole lot of training with you. I've done a fair amount, but not 10 years worth.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen tremendous growth in you as a martial artist from not even having a belt, just coming in your sweatpants first class to now where you've been here for a couple of years, a year and a half, whatever that case may be. There's been tremendous growth. A lot of that comes from inexperience, not knowing things. Like, you get told stuff, right? Like in class, we get told things like, okay, we're going to do this today. We're going to work this drill. And a lot of times, for most people, that drill is the first time you've ever done anything like that. Mm-hmm. So, unless you're a person with a lot of imagination, like a kid who's still like talking to imaginary friends and believing that Santa Claus is real, you are doing this exactly as described. You go from point A to point B. There's no variation because you're trying to do that thing correctly. You put that into a live situation like sparring, and that's what you do because that's what you've been taught, right? And I think you can apply this to a lot of different things. And it's until you've done that a few hundred or 1,000 times that you find other ways of doing those techniques or those tactics. And I'm speaking from personal experience. And until I did those things over and over and over again and failed and succeeded and everything in between, I didn't feel like I had a grasp of a lot of them until I had some experience and until I got my rear end handed to me a handful of times. And I'm like, oh, I'm not going to do that like that again, you know? Yeah. So I think a lot of it just boils down to like putting your feet to the fire over and over again. And like knowing that like sometimes I'm going to get burned on this and other times I'm going to figure it out, you know? I don't know.
No, I totally agree. And I think like experience is like a double-edged sword. You know, like experience, like our experience, right? That we experience. It's like it gives us new reference experience. It gives us new memories and we learn new stuff. But it's almost like it causes us to it can cause us to second guess ourselves, or
like especially if it doesn't work the first time. You know, it's like once you've tasted defeat, then you know it. Like once you've won or you've lost in a certain thing, or succeeded or failed in a certain thing, whatever it could be, any activity, any sport. You know, then it's almost like you get gun shy.
You've had that. You know, like you take somebody that's never gun shy. Perfect example. You take somebody who's we just had it a couple weeks ago at a firearms class I was training. Lady paid for the gun at this firearms class, and she was going to start shooting it. And her very first shot, she got that pistol up, and it was a 9mm, and she got that pistol up, and first shot, and she lined up her sights, bang, dead center. I'm talking like within a half inch of dead center of the entire target.
Wow.
That was her first shot. Her second shot was a little bit further away. Then the third shot, and she just slowly started getting further and away because she got used to the recoil or kick of the gun, or she wasn't used to it, and she started anticipating it. So she would flinch
or flinching.
And so her bullets started going more other different way, more erratic. So it's like, having when you do something and you get like the beginner's luck, you know, they call it the beginner's luck. But then as you progress, you're at a stage now where you're at purple belt, right?
Correct.
Purple belt. So you're in a way you're in a really a place that's going to stretch you right now, because you're now disregarding everything. Not disregarding. You like you said early on when you first came in, you didn't care. You would cross that line, you would hit your opponent, and you didn't care that they could hit you. Boom, boom.
You didn't realize.
And maybe they did hit you, or maybe they didn't, and you just didn't care. So then you got away from your opponent, you know. So you got in, got your hits, and got out. But now you've probably got in, and the people you're training with have got better, and so now you know, like, oh, every time I get in close on Sensei Court, he's going to hit me. You know, every time I get in close on someone else, they're going to hit me. So it's almost like you know somebody's abilities, and it's almost like you're anticipating what they're going to do as far as getting in. If that kind of makes any sense. The only reason I say this is because I know exactly what you're talking about. and go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So for me, I guess in this context, when I say imagination, for me, it's almost like a fear.
Yeah,
I should say.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know he's not going to hit me hard.
Yeah,
I know
you trust him.
Yeah, I know it. I know it's not gonna hurt, or if it does, it's not gonna hurt terribly. But it's still that knowing that is coming. That's
a potential thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And imagine you have imagination. You know, I'm going to charge. You know, just headstrong into it and go for this, or I got to stay way back because I'm afraid of this guy. But then, you know, some of the other people I spar with, some of the people that are more on my level, I'm more grounded in reality with them. Yeah. I know what they're capable of. I know what I'm capable of, and we can work together on it. Mm-hmm. Versus someone who is substantially higher ranking than I am. On one hand, I know what they're capable of, and I also don't know what they're capable of because they've done things that I've never seen
or experienced yourself.
Yeah.
So that is quite the conundrum, honestly. I was where you're at now is when I considered quitting.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't understand the concepts, the tactics, the set work. It didn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. And for me to do stuff or be enthusiastic about anything, I have to understand why I'm doing it. And it's troubled me my whole life. I've had jobs that I've left because I'm like, that's dumb and I don't know why I'm doing it. And whomever was in charge was like, well, you need to figure it out. And I'm not explaining, you know, I'm like, peace out. I'm done. I'll go find something else to do. And so, like, I want to understand the nuts and bolts, because once I understand the nuts and bolts, it all makes sense to me. And that's just the way, like, my brain works, you know. And so I couldn't make the techniques work. And one day I came to class and I was like, that's it. If we spar, I'm only using these techniques that I don't like, that I can't figure out. And I'm going to either make them work or I'm just going to get punched in the face. And that's just the way it is. Mm-hmm. And so I went and found, and I distinctly remember this, I went and found a bunch of people to spar with that were below me that there was room for error.
Yeah.
And you know, I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go dominate this person. It was just like, I'm going to try all this new wacky stuff that I don't know and don't really necessarily like right now. And I'm going to see if I can make it work. And I probably failed 85% of the time, but there were there was enough wins there to where, like, I was like, okay, I can see how this can work. Mm-hmm. I can see how this works. But I struggled with it enough to where Tyler and I we came up together. And that's the other thing that I want to talk about. But we kind of came up together. We were back and forth as far as our belts and like where we were training. Tyler had gone to a tournament that I wussed out of. And he had won, I don't know if he got second or third, but he had used all the techniques or most of the techniques from that rank. Mm-hmm. And was fairly successful at it. So there was like proof for me. It was like, okay, well, I know they work. And I didn't question that they didn't work. I just questioned like why.
Yeah.
It didn't make sense to me that I would want to spin around and do this or you know, jump in the air and punch somebody. I've seen it done. I know it can work. I don't know why I would want to personally do that kind of thing. You know, so that like validated things for me. And for me, that's like how I have to make things work. I have to understand it. Once I understand it, I can attempt to do it. But if I just have like no clue of how this is supposed to look or work or any of that, I'm like, I got other things I can do, you know?
Yeah.
On the flip side of that coin, and I think if you haven't experienced this, you will. You're going to come across somebody who's a lower rank, and they look at your belt and they get intimidated.
Yes.
So
I felt that way when I started.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you haven't experienced it, you're going to be on the other side of that coin. And there's two ways you can look at it. This is lunch, right? Like, I'm going to knock this guy into next week. Or this is a time where I can bring this person up, or I can work on things that I struggle with.
So I've noticed that anytime I've had to spar with Tyler,
Uh-huh.
is that I feel like you bring yourself down to maybe 60% of where you're at, which is still like 50% above where I'm at. It's challenging.
Yeah.
And I can tell that you're holding yourself back, but you're doing it in a way that it pushes my comfort zone. I have to work harder, and I have to be that much more aware of when, I don't know if I want to say when you're giving me an opening, but where that opportunity is. And I know if you just full on unleashed, it would not work out well for me. But it's you do it in a way that it challenges me, because you're still sparring better than I am, but you're doing it in a way that's just so proficient that I have to be just a lot more in tune with myself and my capabilities, and thinking, okay, I don't want to throw an aerial right now because I'm not good at that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I have to figure out what works against him.
Yeah.
Versus, like you're saying, if you're sparring with someone that's lower ranked, that is the perfect opportunity to do the things that you're not comfortable with.
That's how you learn.
Yeah. And
It's all right.
and I love that you brought up, wanting to know, why this works, because I feel that way with the spins and the step spins. I love them. I think they're fun, and they do work. But for me, when I'm spinning, I feel like it takes so long for me to spin that when I land, I say, "Why haven't you punched me yet?"
Yeah.
It's like I spin around, and I don't want to punch them necessarily, because I'm expecting them to just be
You're
swinging at
waiting
me.
for this
Yeah.
this thing to happen.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's like all sorts of reasons why that could be happening. For one, you're doing the actual work, so it's taking you longer because you're thinking about it.
Yeah,
still, and
thinking
you're
about
planning it out.
Thinking about it.
And it's just like anytime you learn something new, a new skill or anything, you kind of have to think about each step as you go along. You've put together baby furniture, you have children. Mm-hmm. The cribs. First time you open a crib, you have all of this garbage. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and the instructions are in 4 different languages, and none of them you know. So you're like pictogramming everything, and like, okay, those screws all look like every one of the screws I have here. So you're like matching them all up and dividing them in like by size and shape and all this crap. And the first time takes you like 5 times longer than any of the other stuff that you do. But once you put the first thing together, the second one is just that much easier, and it's that much quicker. Same thing. The first few times eventually you're going to get to where you don't even have to think about it, and it's going to go by whip fast. From an outsider's perspective that may have never even seen that before, time freezes for them. Mm-hmm. Everything is like, what in the heck is this person doing?
The first time you showed it to me, I said, okay, can you show me the step spin? And you told me the purpose of it was to cover distance. Mm-hmm. And you did the step spin. And I said, what the heck just happened?
Yeah.
Where did he come from? Why is he so close? And why didn't I do anything?
Yeah.
Right.
And it wasn't done at a blazing speed.
I felt like it was.
But I had slowed that down to demonstrate what's going on. Mm-hmm. And then we're kind of getting into technique heavy, which is fine. But for some of those listeners, we're just talking about different punches and different techniques that we go through. And it's one of those things, though, that like the first time you do something, it's just like, it's awkward. It's like trying to teach a pig how to dance. It just doesn't happen,
Well, and then so this is a quote that I have and that ties right in perfectly with what you're saying, and it goes in with what Kevin wrote in on the email, that the first time you do something, it's awkward, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm going to read this quote from the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. All right. So this part of this book on page 45 under coordination. The fighter whose movements seem awkward, who never seems to find the proper distance, is always being timed, never outguesses his opponent, and always gives warning of his intentions before they become serious. He is suffering chiefly from a lack of coordination. The well-coordinated fighter does everything smoothly and gracefully. He seems to glide in and out of distance with a minimum of effort and a maximum of deception. His timing is usually good because his movements are so rhythmical, they tend to establish complementary rhythm on the part of his opponent, a rhythm he can break to his own advantage because of his perfect control of his own muscles. He seems to outguess his opponent because he usually takes the initiative and, to a large extent, forces the reactions of his opponent. Above all, he makes his movements with a purpose rather than with a doubting hope because he has confidence in himself. I think that's a good quote right
that's
there.
Good.
And
I always love that last part.
Yeah. So you've read that part.
We talked about it on the podcast.
We talked about it
when you guys
yeah.
went over this one.
Yeah.
That was the first quote that I heard on there that I said when I heard that last sentence about the doubting hope. I said that's the bullet drill.
That is.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, I think it comes down to a faith in your ability to move in and out, and you spar with people over and over, right? You have these people in class that you know, and you know what they're kind of capable of. And that kind of makes you to pause, right? Mm-hmm. Like you want to go in, but if I go in on this person, they're going to kick me with a stop kick. Mm-hmm. If I go in this person, they're going to hit me with a round punch and they're going to step out. It makes you pause. To kind of get around that, what I have really done is, we have the people that we train with in class over and over and over, and we get to learn them and they learn us, But the way I've figured I need to break myself of that is tournaments. Doing tournaments, because in a tournament, you're going up against somebody maybe you've gone against at another tournament, but if it's your first or your second or whatever tournament, you're
going to fight somebody completely new.
You are literally being thrown into the fire right away because you don't know what this person's capable of other than they're in the same kind of semi-category as you. They
should have this about the same experience.
Yeah, something like that. Like when I did the tournament in the black belt category, I was like, okay, these are black belts. Like these guys are gonna hit, and they should be hitting accurately with some good control, but good force behind it.
Yeah.
And so, but I literally had to figure these people out. Right there. Then. And there was no time for like, okay, now I've got them figured out. It was like, oh, there's the moment I gotta hit before my mind engages and that imagination kicks in and says, oh, he's got a really good high kick, like round kick, like, oh no, it's like now I've just gotta go and I've gotta be in the moment. So that's how I've kind of found myself. When you talked about overestimating your opponent or underestimating, both, right? So that I think that comes with it's more experience is required because you'll learn more the more opponents you go against, and then confidence in yourself, in your ability to judge or to pass, to be able to what's the word I'm looking for? Evaluate your opponent like that, as best you can. So I think it's just more experience, but also throwing yourself in the fire, like at a tournament or somewhere, maybe if they have another dojo has an open mat, you can walk in, and it's a friendly dojo, and you can go in safely, and they have an open sparring night. I know there's one around here that has an open sparring, and but that or a tournament, and just getting in there and forcing yourself to have to read an opponent, to engage with an opponent before you get to know too much about them. Mm-hmm. Whereas here we know a lot about our friends and our training partners.
Yeah.
And that can cause us to pause. Oh, Dustin's got that really good fading back side lead leg side kick to the head, or he's got that really good back fist, like I know if I go in on Dustin, he's gonna fade back and side kick with that lead leg.
Thank you.
No, but see that gives me pause to go in on you because I know you're going to get me with that.
That's a potential.
Yeah.
The other thing too, like I find I always do my best sparring, whatever, when I'm relaxed. If I'm all excited, or if I'm stressed, or if I'm overthinking things and planning things out, I'm going to do A, B, C, D, whatever. It never goes as planned, for one, and for two, my brain is like trying to take control instead of what I've trained, what I've experienced. Excuse me. Instead of just letting things happen and dealing with it as it happens, if I try and think too much about it, I call it my. I say if my brain is working too hard, I freeze up. It's like putting sand in the gears. It just doesn't flow. When I'm relaxed and almost jovial, just like having fun with it, is when I surprise myself and I do the best. The best that I can do, I feel. When I just take things as it comes. Like I used to be in the same shoes as you. I've known Sensei Court since we were in the 6th grade. He's always been taller. Okay. He was 6'1", like in the 6th grade.
Wow.
Yeah, there were kids. I remember like the first time I met him, he was walking down the hallway at school, and it was like, whose dad is that? You know, some kid. I remember some kid saying that. You know, and so he's always had an advantage as far as reach and length on people. And I've sparred with him when we were kids under Sensei Blue, and other people like Corey. Remember Corey? Yeah, he's another tall, lanky guy who's just can hit you from last week. You know, he's just so much longer than everybody. So if I start worrying about that kind of thing, if I start thinking about like, okay, what's this guy do?
Yeah.
And then I almost psych myself out.
Yes.
When I just don't worry about it, like when it's open sparring in class, and I just raise my hand and somebody comes up and I'm like, okay, good, let's go. I don't have time to think about it, and I just get into it, and that's when I do the best. When they're walking across the room and they're pointing at me and like, hey, let's spar. I'm like, oh crap. Okay, what's this guy do? What's his and if and it screws me all up, and it's almost automatic. And I don't like, sometimes I can forget about it and I'll just do it. And other times I'll be like, all this planning and strategies going in, and I know that it does me no good. So avoid that. And then the other thing is just spar as many people as you can when it's sparring time. Get in there and go with as many people as you can, and then just you'll get it. You'll get your wheels under you there. A lot of what, like Tyler said, with the tournaments and stuff, I see that makes perfect sense. That I can totally get with, and I understand what you're saying. Hopefully some of that's helpful. I don't know. What do you? I mean,
what do you think?
Are we just blowing smoke or what?
So I'll say something that I kind of found interesting the other day in the intermediate class. I had to spar with a couple of the littles.
Yeah.
You know? And in terms of imagination and fear and all that, they didn't have that.
No.
You know, I'm this person that's, 4 times their body mass.
Yeah.
And
they've got to physically pick them up and throw them across the room.
They've got a big smile on their face, and they have no problem just jumping right in there and taking those punches. And if I'm going up against someone who's 3 inches taller than me, I'm keeping my distance, and I'm thinking, how am I going to make this work? And here is this little person who they're just going for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. They don't
no fear.
Exactly. And it was really kind of cool to see, because at that age, I would probably be terrified of someone that size, but one, it's a safe
space. Environment.
Yeah, but
as far as punching and getting kicked and stuff can go.
yeah. But anyway, I found that really interesting that at that age, I don't know if it's too much imagination, too little imagination, or just a respect for what they're doing, that they know they have to get in there and they have to do it. But that age, it's awesome.
When I was a kid, I was never much of a tree climber, right? But I did climb trees as a kid, And looking back, when I was a kid, like we would just climb a tree and go all the way pretty up high, and you never really consider
that you could fall and break your neck.
Or worse. Yeah. And you could fall. And now, like, when I get up in a tree as an adult, I get, 8 feet off the ground, and I'm like, whoa, 3 points of contact. Like everything that could go wrong. But when you're a kid, you're just like, boom, boom, boom,
You're like a little monkey.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it must be something to the effect of, like when and same thing, like when you're younger and you have all your friends and you say, hey, well, let's go on a road trip, right? You don't think about, well, do we have enough money for it?
Food, gas, where we're gonna sleep.
Is the vehicle gonna be okay? Like, like all that. You just kind of like go. But then as we get older, it becomes more calculated and like, what's the risks and what's the, and is that just a maturity thing? Like getting older?
It's called wisdom.
Wisdom, yeah.
It's called wisdom. We've all made massive boners. Excuse me. We've all screwed up, right? We've all went, oh, I'm never doing that again. That was wrong. And so we know the consequences. Whereas sometimes a kid, like I got 3 boys. One of them is the most cautious person I've ever met in my life. He's very reserved. He's very methodical. That kid's probably never going to fall out of a tree. He's not going to make those stupid mistakes. The other 2, the youngest one in particular, who I love to death, he's just not afraid of anything. But there are times when I'm like, that kid needs a helmet before he walks out the front door because he doesn't think about the consequences. The old look before you leap kind of thing. So I think there's some of that. Obviously, you're an adult. You've grown up. You've gone through childhood. You've done all the mistakes. You've crashed your bicycle. You've climbed trees. You've tripped over stuff. You've done all of those things. So the other side of that. Mm. You know what happens when you screw up. It hurts usually. What's the old adage? If you're gonna be dumb, you better be tough.
I've never heard that.
You've never heard that?
I've never heard that.
Oh man, that's something my dad used to tell me a lot.
If you're
gonna be dumb like that, you better be tough, or you better get tough, because it's gonna hurt. And so when I'm sure. Am I wrong? You think about that kind of stuff. There's a consequence if I get too close to this guy.
Well, when I first started here, I remember the very first class where we did sparring, just not having that
wasn't there.
I didn't have that concept of consequences. I didn't know that you could instantaneously block and counter.
Yeah,
I was like, oh, that's a thing.
Yeah.
I started out just circling someone as fast as I could, expending all that energy, getting out of breath, and then you dive in, trying to hit, and it just gets shut down so quick. And it was just that complete unawareness of the consequences of what I was doing, and being unaware of my own limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In other words, it's like another way of putting it is it's like a loss of innocence. Mm-hmm. In a way that you got in there as a white belt and you were or a no belt or a white belt or whatever, and you just got in, you were like hit and then get out, but now that you've got more experience, you're like, oh, like I'm gonna get hit when I get in there, like
I don't just instantly charge at somebody anymore.
It's calculated.
Yeah,
now.
It takes 10 seconds before there's any clash, because the 2 people, we're circling, and it's okay. Where is that opportunity? What are they capable of? And if I jump in there, what am I capable of? Knowing their capabilities or their capacity.
Yeah.
It's all super interesting when it comes to that. Like I have thought about that topic.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think we still think about it.
Yeah, and it's challenging now too because I'm still learning new techniques.
Yes.
So whenever I'm sparring, it's also not a situation of let me get in there, let me score. It's just going to be a clash kind of a thing. It's like you said, you have to throw at least one thing you're not comfortable with because that's how you learn.
Yes.
And so it's how can I get in there with this person, but how can I throw an aerial too?
Yeah.
And I don't like aerials. So
Yeah. And I think a lot of that too, that comes from going with different people because you're going to find everybody does things their own way. Everybody does things just a little bit differently. And so what may work on one person doesn't quite work as well on the next person and vice versa. But you almost don't know until you try.
Mm.
And sometimes you got to try those things multiple times before either you're doing it correctly or you've done it at the right opportunity. Because there's plenty of techniques and things you can do correctly, but at the wrong opportunity. Done correctly doesn't matter if it's not doing what it needs to do when it's at its finished stage.
Yeah.
And that's all part of experience. Like, back to like the spinning punches and stuff, that kind of thing, I had no idea where to start, where to begin, where to end, what the middle should look like, none of that. I knew what the technique was supposed to look like, but I didn't know how to apply it. I didn't know when to apply it. All of that stuff in between, that was like the important things. It's just as important as doing it correctly. I needed to know when and all of that stuff. And that all came from experience. Because, you do it in the air, you practice, but you really practice it with no threat. You practice it with no consequences.
Right.
So even if it's done wrong, you didn't eat a punch in the face, right?
Yeah.
Where like I can imagine in like some of the old Okinawan styles where like the guys are doing the punches in the air, and if they don't do it right, if they don't have the right form, the old sensei or the master is like whacking them with a rattan stick in the back or something, like, no, arms should be a little higher, blah blah blah, whack, So there's no real consequence to doing it wrong. And other than hopefully somebody, an instructor, sees you and goes, no, don't do it like that. Do it like, like this, or adjust this, or whatever. And so those things, it's trial by fire. Mm-hmm. It is. It's truly trial by fire, which is cool. Which is fine, because this is a safe environment. You're not gonna like get your arm broke or your teeth knocked out of your head because you screwed something up, which is a good thing in my opinion. And for the most part, everybody here is courteous. They know, like, if you're doing something wrong, they're not just gonna drill you.
Mm-hmm. They're not going to exploit it.
They're not going to exploit it. Not to a terrible, they might exploit it a little bit to get an advantage on you, but they're not going to like hurt you because you didn't do something correctly. So that's the good thing on that.
You got to have that trial by fire.
I don't know. Thinking about that, I don't know that you could learn it any other way. Really?
Yeah. Well, because when you practice the techniques, you're basically practicing against a static opponent.
Yeah, that's not gonna hit you.
Yeah, or is not gonna move side to
side
or try to hit you back while you're.
Yeah. So for me, when I was going through the purple belt, having to learn a spin or a step spin. In the process of spinning, your opponent moves. They're not
static.
Yeah, they're not where they were when you started.
Yeah.
So it was always it's even now it's still a hard thing. After I come out of that spin, I mean, like I said, one, why haven't they hit me yet? But two, where are they in relation to where I thought they were?
Yeah. And it's I describe those in like back kicks. Back kicks are great And I got into an argument one time about a year ago with a student about back kicks. Because you're turning your back. Why would you turn your back? You never turn your back on somebody, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, well, yeah, you have a point, but I'm not turning my back and staying that way. 1. 2, this isn't a technique I'm going to use every single time. This is high risk, high reward. A back kick hurts. If you do it correctly and you hit your target, it's gonna hurt. Flat out. I don't care. It's a solid kick. But yes, you are spinning around. You are briefly turning your back to your opponent to get that back kick in the right position. There's ways, there's all sorts of ways to throw that back kick, and I love doing it. But it is a high risk, high reward. Anytime you're turning yourself around and with your facing away from a sparring partner or an opponent or whatever, there's risk there. There's a risk there though. Anytime you throw a punch or a kick or move in, there's always a risk. It's calculated though, like obviously a jab is going to be a little bit safer than that cross or that front punch or an uppercut. It's you have distance, you have speed going for you in your advantage. So all of that stuff. I mean, I liken this type of a topic to like trying to explain something to somebody who's never experienced it. Like driving a car. You've driven a car for 10, 15, 20 years, I'm assuming. We all been driving for a while.
Gosh, it has been 20.
Yeah. Not to implicate you on how old you are, but describing driving a car to like your son, who's never driven a car. He has no concept of it. He can understand that the wheel turns the tires and changes the direction of the car, and that the gas pedal makes the car go faster and the brakes stop the car. He can understand that whole thing. But if you put him behind the seat, and he's what, 8?
Yeah.
Okay, we're not going to do that. But I mean, if you were to put him behind the seat, behind the steering wheel, and say, okay, I told you how to drive a car, drive the car, it's going to be a ride. It's going to be an experience. And he's not going to be the smoothest driver ever. Not until he knows what that feels like. And you can describe to him how much muscle you have to put into the steering wheel to turn the wheel, to turn the tires and change the direction. But until he actually does it, he's not going to know what that feels like, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the crux of the whole thing. Like you have to experience what that is, and until you do, talking about it or thinking about it it doesn't do you no good. It does you some good, but like it's not in there. It's not there. You don't know it yet. Like trying to describe the taste of a steak. Right? Yeah. Like just put the dang piece of meat in your mouth and chew it. You'll know what it tastes like. It's good. You'll eat it, But it's like it's the experience. You have to have the experience to really fully have the knowledge.
See, a couple of years from now, I mean, what do you think about all that? You think are you looking forward, like you're enjoying this part that you're in right now about having the too much imagination or too little, or you feel like
I think I move away from that. It kind of ebbs and flows. I move away depending on who I'm sparring with, and then like I said, in the instance that I had emailed you guys about, it was when I was sparring with Sensei Court, and all of a sudden it was
the realization.
Yeah. So it ebbs and flows.
Well, I will tell you this, because I've been in those shoes, and I still get in those shoes. and I don't mean to interrupt you, but there's going to come a time, if you stick with it, where you're actually going to succeed through something. You're going to get through and actually hit Sensei Court or somebody else.
The first time you hit him, did it feel great?
Oh my Lord! It was like Christmas, my birthday, and my paycheck all in one day. It was so great. Let me tell you. And I did it again just last week, and he acknowledged that I had done it, and I was like, yeah! It was so great. It's more frequent now because he's older. No. It's more frequent now because I'd like to think that I've improved.
Your skills have improved.
My skills have improved, and I'm becoming more of a challenge.
And you've gotten a better read on him.
And I've gotten a better read on him, yeah. And you will too, eventually. I mean, like, you could probably count the number of times you've sparred one-on-one with him.
Correct.
Now.
Right. Yeah, it's been very,
and soon enough it'll be like, I don't know, I sparred the guy every other week, and that just it happens as you get some age on you in the school, but yeah, the first time, man, it was so great. It was so great, and for our black belt test, like when I was practicing for my black belt test, I had stretched and like warmed up. And I had stretched those like 3 months harder than I'd ever like stretched in my life, because my goal was to round kick him in the head.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, I was like, okay. I don't care. I don't if I pass, if I fail. Like, I hope I pass, but if I don't, whatever. I just want to round kick him in the head. And I can't. I don't know if I did that or not, but I could get my foot up that high. When it came time, my foot could go up that high, and that was like, oh, victory. I climbed the mountain. I was like, yeah.
Your foot can still go that high.
It still can go that high. It still can go that high now. But yeah. It just it comes. It'll get there. It'll get there. You just have to keep trying.
Yeah, I even I had this weird when I was in advanced brown belt and we were getting ready to test for the black belt. I had a relapse into when we were sparring, and I was circling my opponent, and I remember who I was sparring with, and this person kept hitting me, and I wasn't hitting back, and I was more worried about keeping my middle stance and my hands up than I was actually about hitting back.
About engaging.
And I was constantly switching between experiencing and expecting and like watching my opponent, but then is my stance solid? And watching my opponent, is my stance solid? And I just, as I'm getting hit, bam, 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 on my, and I was like, okay, what am I doing wrong? And I had to do some self-diagnosis, and I was spending too much time thinking about my middle stance when I should have been engaging. But I think what's really good is like you describing this thing you're going through as far as too much imagination, too little imagination. You're expecting to get hit. Are you overestimating your opponent?
Underestimating yourself.
Underestimating yourself. I think that's just a good gate you have to go through, just to pass through, and you'll come out on the other side, like you were saying, and you'll be like, oh, okay, now I went through that. That's what that is. And I think it's going to be more experience, more going through it. And
yeah, I want to talk about more stuff, but I have just one more thing to add to that. I don't know how much you are struggling with this. I assume enough to where you wrote an email.
Like I said, it ebbs and flows. I think I more wrote the email because I wanted your guys' take on just that in terms of an experience in martial arts. Yeah. But again, for me, it ebbs and flows because it's going to depend on who I'm sparring with. It's going to depend on what I ate for breakfast that morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. There are times when I'll come in here and it's like, you know what? I feel really confident today.
I feel good.
Yeah. And there are times when you come in and you're like, man, I wish I would have stretched more or had one less enchilada at lunch. Or whatever,
And we've all done that. For sure.
Yeah.
I did that just not too long ago. I ate a huge lunch and came in here and I was like...
That's the thing about the intermediate class is I know how intense it's going to be, that it's like I need to eat something.
But I don't want to
I don't want to
overeat
eat too much.
I had one time I took a test and I was really hungry. I had like a light lunch. So I stopped at the drive-thru before the test, got like the giant Whopper at Burger King and ate that and then did the test. Terrible mistake. terrible mistake. Yeah, I don't remember what test it was, but it was not one of my brighter moments. But yeah, I know exactly what you mean. But as far as goals or challenges or whatever the case may be, like you're just trying to learn something new. I always feel like life throws a few curveballs at you. You know, you have a goal to buy a new car or repaint the house or go on a vacation, and something else will break down. Some other challenge gets thrown in your way, whether you believe in God or life or whatever the case may be. And I'm not, in my mind, first off, I always swear, and I'm like, God dang it, life sucks. This is hard, whatever. And then the second thing is like, okay, this is a test. How bad do I want this? Mm-hmm. Am I willing to deal with whatever this problem is, this curveball or this thing that I'm struggling with? Am I willing to go through that to get to what I want? Mm-hmm. And I, daily, weekly, hourly sometimes, I feel like those challenges happen.
Well, like right now for me, I feel very motivated with martial arts.
That's awesome.
And partly is because I already paid. So I have to be motivated. But it's for me once I got to purple belt, things just change. Things become a lot more serious and a lot funner in my opinion.
It is. I go ahead.
When I took the purple belt test, I felt great about that test.
Yeah.
You always ask people, oh, how was the test? How was the test? Well, that one was freaking easy because I felt good about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't want to say I feel good about taking the next one. I feel motivated to take it because I hate everything on the set work. And that is a great motivation to want to be done with it, That was my story exactly. Because I was like, I hate this stuff. And now I love it. Yeah.
But at the time, I hated it because I was struggling with it. So I was like, just pass the test and never do this crap again. I will never do this crap again. And I apologize to anyone who may be listening to this. Mr. Bruce Terrell, if you're hearing this, which I hope to God you're not right now, I apologize. But at the time, I freaking hated it. Now I love it. But my thought was exactly that. I'm going to learn this stuff to pass the test and never do it again. And then I'll just move on. Well, if you find out really quickly that stuff's important and it's helpful and it works. And I kind of rely on a lot of those now. Mm-hmm. And it's really strange because I hated that stuff and I'm never doing it again. And that was my mindset. And now I'm like, I find I use them fairly often, or if not often enough, I know it's in my back pocket, and I know that like I can pull that out if I need it.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is a cool thing, but it made me feel not foolish, but it made me kind of feel silly. Like, you really put too much emphasis on like how hard this was or whatever.
But it's in your toolbox now.
It's in my toolbox.
It's a tool that you can use versus when that is what your test is.
Yeah.
It's not a tool. It is the thing that you have to practice.
It's the mountain to climb.
And like right now, I'm looking at it and I'm saying aerials. I'm 35 and 35 pounds overweight. If I wait another year, I'm going to be 36 and 36 pounds overweight. I need to jump now because it's only going to get harder. But once it's there, like you said, it's that tool. You can fall back on it, but you don't have to do it every single time.
You're not doing it week in, week out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's my motivation. Is I don't like to jump, so I want to get it out of the way. And It's great. Anytime I've had to throw it in sparring, it throws off your opponent.
Yeah.
So it's a great tool.
Yeah.
And I want to get to the point where I have that tool and I can pull it out when I need it, and I don't have to practice it on the weekends.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, for sure. I don't have to practice it on the weekend.
Obviously, you have to,
you have to practice, but you're not going to practice it week in, week out.
Yeah.
Like you would if you're taking a test.
Yeah.
I got you. That's awesome.
That is.
That is so great.
Yeah.
That's so great, guys.
And I would say with the going from purple or being at a purple belt and now working on the stuff for advanced purple, what is another thing that's challenging right now is, it is becoming formless. Everything we've done so far has been set work.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's okay, simultaneous kicks, but you have to figure out how you want to throw those.
Right.
And you're doing the was it 1, 2, 3, 2, 1s.
Yeah.
Well, you need to figure out how you're going to do that. You need to come up with your combinations.
And what works for you may not work for the next person.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's becoming more creative now. And up until this point, it was like, okay, Dustin, can you show me what to do on my test? And it's not like that anymore. You've already shown me what to do. I just need to figure out the order that I want to do it in, or the order that I can do it in, or the order that's most effective for me.
Yeah.
And that to me is very challenging.
It is. Because now it's like, I can't just rely on this sheet of paper that says do A, B, C, and D, and I'm good. Now it's like, I got to make this thing work. And how do I make this work? And it's one of the really unique things, I think, about this style, that it allows for a lot of personal expression, for lack of a better term. We all study, we all train the same way, we all train the same style, but if you go, each one of us does it in our own little way. We're all, I liken it a lot to boxing, because boxing is so simple. Two guys get in a ring and punch the crowd out of each other. There's 6, 7 punches. Jab, cross, straight, uppercut, hook. 5, 6, 7 punches. But especially at the professional level, each one of those boxers, very rarely do you see two guys or women do the same exact thing. They all have their own unique style, their own unique way of doing things, and some have better technique or better tools. They might have a better jab or a better hook, or they have a special way of doing things that the other guy doesn't have. But it's the same set of punches. It's the same style. It's the same thing, except for it really allows the individual to do what they do. It's not real cookie cutter. And I liken that a lot to the way we do things here, because you got all different types of people with all different types of experiences and skill sets. But we're all, we are doing the same style of martial arts. We're all training the same set work. We all went through the ranks together, or, we did the same stuff on the same ranks. But it's how you do it versus how I do it versus how Tyler does it that makes it unique.
Yeah, because
it's cool.
I would say there's people that I spar with who can kick me in the face. They can do a round kick to my head, and they can do it very, very comfortably. So my style has to adapt to the fact that I can't do that, and I have to work around the fact that they can. And that's really, I really like that, because if I'm sparring with someone who can't throw that kick, well, you know what? Now I can probably incorporate a few more things, but I have to understand the fact that they have a new strength now.
Yeah.
And when I'm going up with against someone who can kick, a lot of times for me, I have to figure out how I can get past the range of that kick to where I can fight closer to them.
For sure.
But I was watching there was a boxing thing. It was on. We have Hulu, and it was like the Hulu ESPN whatever. We don't like the free ESPN.
Yeah.
So it was a boxing match from 2 people in like Guatemala or something, And I only watched a couple minutes because I don't particularly care to watch people fight that much. But it was really interesting because these boxers, they would go in, and one guy would always throw an uppercut and back out. And the other guy just couldn't conceptualize that or hadn't practiced that particular move. But this one guy, they'd go in, the guy would throw an uppercut and they'd back out. And he had a clear advantage because they had the same tools. But one guy was better at one specific tool. You know? But that one was really cool to see.
Well, and boxing is like a chess match. MMA is like a chess match. Mm-hmm. When we're sparring, it's a chess match. Now it's physical contact with dire consequences. But it's strategy and it's tactics and it's all of these things in one. And it's completely unpredictable. You know, gamblers would argue that it's not because there's always odds on people. Mm-hmm. But there's always the chance that one shot or one misstep or one thing could go wrong and somebody's lights out. And that's what I find so thrilling about it and so exciting. And I watch a lot of boxing and MMA on YouTube, old fights. And I'll like get fascinated with a specific person, and I'll just watch breakdowns of their techniques and watch things because it's amazing and see how it works, see how it doesn't work, and all that kind of thing. But it really is a chess match, and if you've ever played chess, you know that there's each move, each piece on the chessboard has its own particular sets of strengths and weaknesses, and they can make certain moves that other pieces can't make. And I don't know, it's cool. It's cool. It's just way interesting to me.
I think finding out all these challenges, like these things we're talking about, like it's really cool because martial arts really reveals a lot of insecurities. We have
that everyone has. Everyone has them. I don't care who you are. Everyone has them.
And these things where we go and we're man, if I move in to hit this guy, I'm gonna get hit by him. Like, well, that either forces you either only got a couple choices. Like, you either never move in, never hit the guy, then you might that's not good because then you're not learning anything but to run away. Mm-hmm. Or B, you get in and you get hit, and then you're like, okay, well, now I got to change this. I got to, the essence of our art is getting in, get your hit, and get out without getting hit, right? Yeah.
In one of the intermediate classes, a month ago, 2 months ago, when Sensei Court first put up that priority scale.
Yeah.
One of the things that we did, he was teaching us to commit to your strike, basically.
Yes.
It was so if I was going to throw a punch, I would throw quick close in, throw a front punch head. The person that I'm throwing it at, their job wasn't to block and counter. Their job was just to counter. They weren't going to block, but they were going to hit me, and I had to be okay with them hitting me, because the idea was to get in there, and I've already committed to doing that. But if all of a sudden I'm afraid of getting hit, their job is to hit me, so that will
changes.
Hit me.
It changes.
So you still have to follow through. I mean, you can't stop and hit that hand out because nothing happens at that point.
Yeah.
So
that was a huge mental block for me because I'm not a very aggressive person. Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not an aggressive sparer, I don't think. I don't charge headlong into things because I don't want to get hit. And doing that drill was like tough. It's a challenge. Mm-hmm. It's a challenge.
Yeah, to commit to the hit.
To commit, even though you know you're gonna get it.
Yeah, it pushes that comfort zone.
Yeah, for sure.
Lot. But it's really valuable because, like when I was talking to you guys about when I had to do the bull sparring with the Sensei Court, that was the challenge. I couldn't commit to that hit.
Yeah,
I already knew he was going to hit me. He knew he was going to hit me. So at the end of the day, I'm like, well, why did I waste all that? I still got hit.
Yeah.
I threw a kick, and you know when you throw a kick out of range with him, how he stands back and he smiles. He knows ahead of time that you're out of range, hit him. And he just has that big smile on his face. He says, "You just wasted it." Yeah. And at that point, it sinks in. You're like, "I did just waste it," and he's got one left,
and now I'm in trouble.
Yeah, because I didn't commit.
Yeah,
you know. But.
Well, eventually, with all these things, you're either going to find a way, you're going to talk with someone and get an answer, or find a way, like how to overcome that. There's been so many times where I'm just like, I'm going in and I'm getting hit. Like, how do I got to do it? Now it's how can I get in, get my hit without getting out? Like, and it's like self-diagnosis, self-diagnose your own thing. And it forces you either keep doing the same thing over and over and getting the same results, which we know what that is.
That's the definition of insanity.
Or you find another way. Like, how bad, do you want this? You find another way. How you find another way to get in and get your hit.
It's usually not as complicated as you think it is.
No, it's not.
That's the funny thing. And it's like, it's 90% of that is upstairs in your head.
It's breaking that comfort zone.
Yeah, breaking that comfort zone. But like once you do it, you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad. Anyway, we've that. Let's change gears here a little bit. Are you good on time? You don't have to be anywhere.
I'm good.
Okay. You're good too. Okay, perfect. How did you get started?
So, I've got my son Hunter does it.
Yeah.
And
he was first.
Yeah, correct. So we had signed him up. Trinisha was taking him to the classes.
Yeah.
And then one day she says, "Oh, can you take him? I've got to do whatever." And I'm like, "Okay, yeah, sure, I'll take him." And I remember I took him to the class, and Sensei Court was teaching the step through sidekick.
Okay.
And I have no experience in martial arts. I had never seen any of this stuff before. But he explained it kind of like, or he used the reference about, when martial arts was first being, invented, or karate was first being invented, it was taught originally as a dance, or it was likened to a dance because that's how you concealed the fact that you were learning martial arts from your oppressors. And the way the Sensei Court was doing this step through sidekick, it was just such a beautiful motion, So for me, it was seeing it almost like a dance. It was, it's a 3-step process.
Yeah.
But he delivers it so well, the footwork, and then kind of the snap of the pants when he delivers that sidekick, everything just kind of lined up. And I said, that was really cool. That didn't look overwhelming. Up until that point, the idea of taking martial arts, I don't know if I could ever do a black belt test. I mean, why look at the end goal?
Yeah.
I saw it as that was a really cool looking kick. I want to do that. My kid's doing that. He's having fun. Like,
I want to do this now.
And then I talked to Trinisha, and she wanted it. She was like, "Yeah, that sounds really cool." For me, I tend to be somewhat of an anxious person, so I like having. I like having someone to lead me into something, and Trinisha's really good about that.
Okay.
So she.
Your wife's wonderful, by the way.
Yeah, she is. She was definitely. I don't know how I've lived this long. Up until I met her. I don't know, but anyways, so she agreed to do it with me, and I think if she would have said no, I probably wouldn't have done it because it was outside of my comfort zone.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But
that's what got me started was, I guess, just watching that one particular class and that one particular move, just how it was delivered. If I had gone that day and it was like, okay, let's do front punch head,
it probably wouldn't have been anything
exactly
fire for you.
Yeah, but it was more elaborate than that, and it was just so rhythmic that it was less martial and more art.
Okay. Yeah. How cool.
Yeah. So that's what got me started.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. So you had no desire as a kid watching movies or anything like that?
I think there was the whole just kind of romanticizing the idea of martial arts.
Yeah.
It was Ninja Turtles, then it was Power Rangers. Yeah, and
Yeah.
when I heard you say that on an episode before, I was like, that's what it was. And I remember when I was a kid, there was an episode of Power Rangers where they talked about how they showed like how to do some kind of front kick where you jump and switch your leg and do a front kick and it's shifting your weight and whatever. And I remember practicing that as like a 7-year-old, like probably doing it totally wrong the whole time, but thinking it was so cool because the Power Rangers did it and they just told me how to do it and all that. And
that is hilarious.
Anyways, I think there was kind of romanticizing the idea of that looks cool, ninjas, right on, and now it's like I'm 35. I'm not getting younger. I'm not getting thinner. Things hurt more every day, So it's like I better do this now. I mean, from the outside looking in, everyone's probably looking at me and being like, "I remember that movie, with Chris Farley, Beverly Hills Ninja. That's the guy right there, But
no.
Yeah,
it beats it beats sitting on the couch.
Exactly.
It beats sitting on the couch.
Yeah.
That's great. That is so great.
Yeah. Martial arts, I keep going back to what Sensei Court says. Martial arts is like, it's a vehicle to do life in. Mm-hmm. It's a vehicle through which to do life. And like that, seeing that kick that he did, it was more art. What you said, more
less martial, more art.
Less martial, more art. Yeah. And it's just funny how I'm sure you've seen the benefits of doing martial arts, and you've seen it like in your personal life too, like, right? I mean, you probably
you start saying, well, why can't I do something?
Exactly.
And that's what it is. I mean, you start off, well, I can't throw a spinning reverse. Well, I can, probably not as great as I would like. I don't like spinning around, but I can do it. Yeah, I can do it. And if I can do that, why can't I do something else?
Exactly.
I hate aerials, but why can't I do an aerial? I can. I jumped. You saw me jump the other day. Didn't feel good, but you know what? I said, I'm going to do this, and I need to jump over this because Tyler made it that high, and if I don't jump over it, I'm going to fall. Yeah. So it's just, it kind of pushes you for other things.
Well, it helps you to see the potential that you have.
Mm-hmm.
When you do something challenging and it's hard and you have to work at it and you finally get it, it's like, okay, I did that. Great. I feel good. What else can I do?
Right.
Mm-hmm. What else can I do? And the other day I was talking with my wife about that very thing. She's like, you are so busy. I would lose my mind if I was that busy. And I'm like, well, you are that busy. You've got, we have 3 kids. My father-in-law lives with us on our property. There's never not something to do. And we have like Noah's Ark at our house. We have chickens and dogs and a bearded dragon and fish. And I'm sure I'm forgetting something. You
got an elephant there.
I think what you're getting at is you need some sheep.
If you tell my wife, I will snipe you. If my wife's listening to this, no. Maybe hanging in the locker.
There you go. I like them better that way too.
Yeah, I bet. But I've never been happier.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm constantly on the go. I'm constantly doing stuff. And as before, I think I would have been like, that would be nice. That would be nice to do. Maybe I should do that one day. And I would have been that person thinking about that. And now I'm like, how can I make this happen? How can I do that? I wonder, I should give this a try. And so it is because of martial arts. Not that I'm more of a doer and less of a I should.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, this podcast started because I was like, I want to do this. And I would have been totally content to talk about how I wanted to do this for the next 20 years. If it wasn't for Tyler going, let's start Monday. I have some recording equipment. We can do this. And I was like, oh, well, I just jumped in the deep end now. Well, I guess we're doing this, So it allows you, it gives you the permission to be like, I think I can do that. You know, whereas before, I don't know. I would have just talked about it. You know.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is cool. And you know, I don't think there are other hobbies or passions that are quite like that. You know, I have a lot of hobbies. I'm kind of the king of hobbies. I find things that interest me and I'll dive into it and do a bunch of that stuff. And but this is one that has really been the healthiest for me, I would say.
Yeah, I know. It was kind of like the same thing with starting doing this podcast, where I was like, I had reference experience of trying to do other filmmaking or videography work in the past that, you know, certain things had either they had just ended without super success, or they had failed miserably, or, you know, they just didn't work out the way that we wanted. So like you're saying, when the idea for this podcast came up, rather than being like me going in my past and accessing my past failures or past whatever you want to call them, past, you know, non-successes, and being like, well, when I got people together to do this, it didn't work out, so that means that's probably going to be the same thing that's going to happen with the podcast, like it won't work out. And I was like, you know, instead of being like that, I was like, nope, we're going to do this, like this is how it's going to go, like we're going to make this thing happen, like, and just full steam ahead, you know. So kind of the same principle that you were saying, as far as like, oh, I want to get in and get my hit, but I get hit at the same time, but I don't know, I'm expecting them to, you know, hit me.
Yeah.
I could have been like, oh, well, people aren't going to show up for the podcast.
All the negatives.
Yeah, a plane's going to fly into the room where we're at, you know, like all these things that could go wrong, and the negatives. And I was like, nope, not going to listen to those voices.
Well, I'm glad that you guys do the podcast, because I think of it as like the lecture portion of what we do out there.
Yeah.
Out there is the lab. That's the practical stuff. But the podcast, when I listen to it, I'm like, this is the discussion about what we've done out there. This is the stuff that makes you think.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not necessarily hearing, oh, this is the background story of so-and-so.
Yeah.
But when you guys talk about, you know, challenges, or just the importance of martial arts and how it's changed your life and things like that, that's the stuff that goes hand in hand with what we do out there. You can't talk about it out there because
there's not enough time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because it's life. It's not like just martial arts. You know, I mean, it's applicable to applicable. Thank you. It's been a long day for me. It's applicable to many different facets of your life. You know, work, relationships, relationships with my kids, with my neighbors. I mean, just with my parents. I mean, just over and over again, I'm finding that the things that I'm doing and learning and experiencing have helped me tenfold, you know, and so it's really like my wife asked me at one point when I was done, like, when are you going to be done? And I've said this before, but it was like, well, when you put me in the ground, I'll quit. You know, I really don't foresee an end to this for me. As long as I have a place to go and can use my 2 feet, and I'm gonna keep at it. You know, because I want to get better, and that's the other part. It's like I get a little bit of experience, I get a little bit of growth in something, and I'm like, oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I want a little more. You know, it's a good drug. You know, it's a good drug.
It is.
Could be worse. Could always be worse.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I really enjoy is the chance for reflection afterwards. You know, when you go out there and you you have a great day and you get to think about this worked, or you have a bad day and you get to think, these are the opportunities I missed.
Yeah.
Or when you just get to think about the techniques in general. On Wednesday in just in the regular class, we were doing the spinning reverse kick. And watching Sensei throw it, you hit your target, and then your knee kind of bends back down as you're coming back to it. And I went home and I started thinking about it, and I remember conservation of rotational momentum. And you have the equation for rotational momentum, and one of the variables is the radius. Your mass isn't changing.
No.
But if you shorten that radius, which is the length of your leg, then the velocity has to increase, because the momentum of your body stays exactly. You're staying the same. So once you bring your leg in, your velocity has to increase. And if you bring it in just short of hitting your target, you're now hitting that target with a higher velocity, because you've increased it just by shortening that radius. And it was really kind of cool to see that, and then be like, oh yeah, physics,
Wow.
Are you learning right now? I'm learning too.
So everyone after this is going to Google conservation of rotational momentum. Yeah.
I am definitely going to do that.
Yeah. Well, I remember when a physics class I had taken, and they did an experiment, or I shouldn't say an experiment, did a demonstration in a chair like that, where if you put your feet out and someone spins you,
you'll spin slower.
You're spinning at a certain speed, and you bring your feet in, and all of a sudden your speed increases.
Yeah.
Because your radius has just been shortened. The momentum as you spin is the same, but because one variable is less, that other variable, the velocity, has to go up. And that's the spinning reverse kick, and it was super cool to see that.
Right on.
But
yes, we study physics. Yeah. All the time.
Yeah.
I just happen to remember that. Don't ask me any follow-up questions.
Yeah. It's my neighbor is a geologist, a geological engineer, super awesome guy, but he does math equations and figures out. He's also a master woodworker, and measures stuff. He built me a cabinet for my kitchen. It's the nicest piece of furniture in my entire house, and my children aren't allowed to touch it because children tear stuff up like nobody's business. But the amount of detail in how he got this thing square. I mean, he started with flat sheets of lumber and just it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But he started with just flat sheets of lumber and made a box with drawers and everything. I kind of helped him do a little bit here and there, and just watching him make sure all the angles were 90 degrees and square and all of this stuff. It was really cool, right? He does all these calculations and writing stuff out, and he's got his Swanson speed square out, and we're checking all the angles, and it's off just a hair, right? So we've done all of this stuff, and it's just human error. And he goes, it's off a little bit, and he grabs one corner with one hand and the opposite corner with the other hand, and kind of gives it a quick twist. It's square now. It's just awesome. On the flip side of your physics equation. But
yeah. Well, the other one I always think about too is kinetic energy.
Yes.
1/2 times mass times velocity squared.
Yes.
And when you think about that, about front punch head, you learn it and you step into it because you're increasing your mass.
Yes.
If I punch you as hard as I can, as fast as I can, that's my limit. My velocity can't go any higher. I don't have that physical capability. So my variable that I can change is my mass. So when we quit close in, that's why you're hitting before or as you land. Because one, you have more mass as you're moving, but two, you have the velocity of yourself as you're moving. And that's one that I really enjoy because it's absolutely applicable. Your mass is the only variable you can change in some of those situations.
Yeah.
Versus if I'm throwing it like
just with your arm.
Just with my arm, or I'm twisting my hips a little, or now I'm rotating on the balls of my feet and I'm getting as much as I can in there. That's more mass because my velocity can't go any faster. I'm only capable of throwing a punch so quickly.
Exactly.
So that's some of the stuff I really
the
love
nuts and bolts of the stuff.
Yeah, when you look at it and you kind of really get down to why does it work? Physically, why does it work? Mathematically, why does it work? Just thinking about that. I can't tell you why it does. Don't ask me any follow-up questions. Let's sit down. But it's just getting to think about that stuff is really, really interesting.
It's outside of the norm of your normal thinking pattern.
Yeah.
Like, unless you're a physicist, at work every day, you don't get to think about that stuff.
Yeah.
You're thinking about work.
Yeah.
Right.
This is the opportunity to see and to think about the things you don't normally get to.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
I love to hear about different people's perspectives and different people's thoughts on stuff like that. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
That was that's gold. I love that.
Yeah. So next time you ask in class, why do you need to rotate on the balls of your feet and throw to your hips? And if someone doesn't say, well, 1/2 times mass times velocity squared, and you say, wrong.
I demonstrated that to people. You can demonstrate it super simple. Stand with your feet planted and punch the punching bag as hard as you can, just using your arm motion. You can make the bag, move. But then actually step forward and throw that punch by rotating your hips on, You can rock and roll that bag, just by adding your mass behind that punch and by doing that. And it's night and day difference.
Yeah, well, Sensei talked about Bruce Lee's 6-inch punch or something.
Yeah.
1-inch punch.
The 1-inch punch.
I had never heard of that before, so after he talked about it one day, I went home and I saw the video, and it's amazing. It's almost hard to believe that. I mean, I think the one guy is the U.S. karate master. Or something. Yeah, and then Bruce Lee
goes sliding across the floor.
Yeah, it's not just like a noticeable difference. It is night and day. You're like, whoa, that just worked.
I saw another one where he kicked a bag. A guy was holding an air shield, and he was demonstrating it. It was on a TV show, but they actually did the demonstration on the show. It's for a show that he had like 1 or 2 parts in. I think it was called Longstreet. I don't remember the name of the show. I think it was Longstreet, but I could be wrong. Anyway, he demonstrates that kind of step-through sidekick thing and talks about why it works and how it works. And this guy is like much bigger than him and he's like, whatever. He knocks him into a swimming pool from like 4 foot, 5 foot away. Like he goes flying back. And physics, Yeah, he should have just said. In fact, it would have been a funnier line if Bruce Lee would have just said physics.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so rather than when you stand with your feet planted versus taking that step with that lead foot, and how is that changing your mass? Is that because you're putting the weight behind you?
So
yes, that's what I'm saying. But I mean, like, you're not physically losing weight for a second, like changing your mass. Like, what does that mean? Changing your mass?
You're adding to it.
Yeah. So if I'm just standing and all I'm doing is punching you with my arm,
right? I get that.
My mass is basically from here,
from your shoulder
from my shoulder to my hand, because nothing else is moving.
Right.
And when I rotate, I now have the mass of my torso rotating with it. So when my fist hits you, my body's following through with it. So it's now all this extra mass. And when I rotate on the balls of my feet, and I'm really throwing it from my hips, now it's the mass from all the way up rotating with it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. It just threw me off when it was changing your mass. So quick close, because you've got the whole weight of your whole body behind that as you're going in and striking. Yeah, no, I get that.
And once you land, you've lost that mass in your punch.
Same with an aerial.
Yeah.
Same with an aerial.
Yeah, because it comes down to kinetic energy is 1/2 times mass times velocity squared, and that's the velocity of the object. Well, again, my punch, I can only throw it so fast. That's basically a fixed variable. It's not really even a variable, but that's the fixed or the constant in it, because if I can't,
that's not going to change.
I can't say, oh well, I'm just gonna throw it faster next time. So it's okay. Well, now I have to have more. I have to throw something else into it, throw something else behind it, because mass is the only variable that I can change.
Okay. Something that goes with that I heard too is the kinetic linking. The kinetic linking, you've heard that term, right? The kinetic linking. So, like you're saying, so rather if you're just standing there and you just throw a punch with just your arm, and no pivot at the hip waist or no pivot in the balls of your feet. Well, when you start pivoting on the ball of your feet, and then you're pivoting at the waist, and then you're pivoting, in your shoulders, and you're throwing that whole thing into it. Well, that punch isn't just your fist is traveling a farther distance because of the pivot, the motion of the pivot. Like, am I saying this the right way? Because your foot is pivoting, then your waist is pivoting, then your torso is pivoting, and your fist is actually, rather than
traveling further
than your actual length of your arm, because you've got more rotation behind it, so it's kinetic linking.
Yeah. And when you watch that Bruce Lee video, you'll see that when he throws it, his torso ends up further forward.
Yes.
Like that is very distinctive when he throws it, because he throws it and it's not throwing it and his torso is just one line right there. The whole body just
has shifted.
Has shifted with it.
And he starts at his feet.
Yeah.
Everything shifts forward.
I was like, did you guys ever see the video of Will Smith slapping Chris Rock?
Yes.
He had very good form on that. If you want, he did very good at pivoting on the balls of his feet and following through. And when I saw it, I said, that must have hurt.
Yeah.
That must have hurt. Yeah. No, but yeah, that's really interesting, because I just like to, as you get older, I think, like, as something that happens, that when we get older, when you start to appreciate numbers and how and whys,
the structure.
The structure, yeah.
As a kid, you like cartoons and kids shows, and it doesn't matter what the story's about, really. I mean, on a base level, the story is somewhat important. There's a bad guy, there's a good guy, they fight, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But, like, as you get into it and get deeper into it, and there's, like, all this other stuff, a kid's show, it's candy, right? It's super simple.
It's shapes and colors.
There's shapes and colors. Yeah. It's bright lights and flashy smiles. Mm-hmm. And then, as you get older, the stories get more complex. The characters are driven by, motivations that they didn't have before. There's depth. You appreciate the depth of things.
The depth of things.
Yeah. Anyway, we've been at this for almost 2 hours. It's an hour and 45 minutes here. So, way longer than I expected. That was awesome. Very good. Thank you very much for coming out, for agreeing to do this. We didn't even have to hog-tie you or threaten you with physical violence.
I was nervous coming out here. I mean, I've heard my voice on an answer machine before, and I apologize to anyone at this point who's listened to me for this long. But you had a chance to stop it, and you didn't, so...
No, don't stop. Keep going.
No, don't stop.
Don't ever stop. Yeah. Anything else you wanna add?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had a great time doing this.
Thank you.
It's fun to talk about it, and it's fun to reflect on our experiences out there.
Absolutely.
I mean, certainly anyone who's doing this class should at some point listen to some of these podcasts, because it's the opportunity to go from just beyond, I'm going to punch and kick things for 1 hour and then return again a couple days later. It's the opportunity to kind of keep that going and keep
that fire going.
Exactly. And to reflect, and just reflecting on it is what's going to make us better.
Absolutely. Tyler, you got anything?
No, I just really appreciate that. I learned a lot, changing your mass.
Yeah.
Changing your mass.
Absolutely.
That'll stick with me.
I really appreciate you. Thank you very much for coming out, Kevin.
Thank you.
This has been great. Thank you for listening. If you want to reach out and ask us a question, much like Kevin did, formlesspod@gmail.com is one way to reach us. We're on Twitter, formless_the, @formless_the. Don't ask me why. Also on Instagram, @the Formless Podcast. And I think that's everything. You can now listen to us on Amazon. They have a podcast platform. You can listen to us there. iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, and I think I'm forgetting a couple others, but we do have an RSS feed, internet lingo for a link. We're out there. So please listen, please share, please rate it, please review it.
Please send in your questions.
Please send in your questions, even if they're hard ones. Critiques, comments. If you want to be on our podcast, let us know. If you want us on your podcast, let us know.
Thank you, Kevin, for sending in a question.
Yeah. Made our job easy.
I was not expecting to be here for this. I told Dustin before we started. I started writing this and started coming up with the idea for it prior to you guys even asking me to be on this. It came about from what I heard on a radio interview with someone who was quoting Hemingway about that, and it just really made me think, and I said, I want to get these guys' opinion on it.
Well, I'm glad that you came with the question, because had we just read this and answered it, I think it probably would have been over in like a minute or two.
Yeah.
And then we would have went on to the next topic. So having you here for your feedback, whether we were on the right track or off the right track, really helped out. So thank you again. Yeah. And this should be up pretty quickly. So have a good one all.